Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Back Row on Air Sport. Plenty to discuss tonight, including Ireland's sevens and Johann van Graan's contract extension down in Munster. Joining me in the studio tonight are Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent and Brendan Fanning of the Sunday Independent. Very welcome along, guys. Loads to discuss. The sevens, first of all, Rory, maybe fill us in on their big achievement.
Yeah, well, they qualified for the World Series as a coronation for the first time, which means they'll be jetting off to Las Vegas, Hong Kong, all the regular spots next season, and kind of belatedly catching up with the rest of the world in some ways, because Ireland really should have been here a couple of years ago. No disrespect, nothing to do with these players. It was an RFU policy decision not to get involved in sevens from the start, but now that David Nucifora has come in, put a real focus on it, put together a proper programme, contracted a load of very talented players and worked their way from the bottom up, Ireland now take their place amongst the nations on the World Sevens circuit. And deservedly so. They won their qualification tournament in Hong Kong very well last weekend, beating the hosts in the final. They were far better than every other team. You could see the calibre of player that Ireland has at its disposal. And from what we saw last year when they were invited to play in the London and Paris Sevens, they've got what it takes to go straight on there and start competing right away. So it's exciting times for those players, and for anyone who's watched Sevens tournaments over the last couple of years and wondered why Ireland aren't part of this, because it's always so colourful and exciting, and you know, something that looked like it would have been great to see an Irish team kind of on that stage. We now get to see how they'll compete now they've been given a fair shot.
It's funny, back in the day when Ireland had the chairmanship of the then IRB, Sid Miller was the man, and Sid used to be getting grief from the other people around the council table saying, why do you lads not take seven seriously? And Sid used to get quite embarrassed about it. And even though he was a powerful figure in the IRFU, anytime he brought up the issue of sevens, the lads just shook their heads and said, nah, that's not for us. Yeah,
and you had a lot of people campaigning, and even Keane Ahern, a guy who played with in Limerick, he was always campaigning. And for him, who was involved at the very beginning of the journey in Division C of Rugby Europe back in 2015, it's been great. I guess take us back to the start in 2015. David Nucifora comes in, coming from Australia where sevens is a big deal. What are the kind of strands to this that offer value for the RFU?
It's numbers, first of all. The first thing he saw about sevens was it's an easier version of the game to sell. He needed to get more people playing the game, so let's get them to play sevens. It's an easier game to play. It's an easier game to put on. There were fewer injuries. Everything about sevens is more attractive if you're trying to draw people into the game who had no contact with the game. Moreover, if you're trying to get genuine athletes who have no rugby union background, sevens is the vehicle to get them involved in. Plus, the end goal is to get to the Olympics. Once you get to the Olympics, the whole picture changes. Now, we're a bit of a distance off getting to the Olympics yet, and the qualifying route for teams going from Europe is very tricky, and it may well be Paris rather than Tokyo by the time Ireland get to that stage. But then it's big business.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fun on the series. Rory will be pushing our editors to be sent all these glamorous.
You can forget that, lads. That's not going to happen.
No chance of that. But I mean, in terms of what's going to happen next with Irish Sevens Rugby, do you feel that we could really grasp it here? Maybe even have a leg in Dublin at some stage? Well,
I think we're some way off that, but I think clearly, World Rugby will look at that and go, well, that's something we want. They're headquartered here. They know what Dublin has to offer as a venue. They're trying to push it. I know Ireland's not a particularly new market from a rugby point of view, but to have an event at the Aviva Stadium, it's ready-made. Dublin's known as a bit of a party town. Sevens is kind of a party sport. The whole event is based around people having a good time. It's accessible from all the major capitals. So I think if Ireland establishes itself as a coronation, the women got on, then got relegated, I think, and then had to re-qualify again. I mean, I think they need a bit of consistency for a couple of years, but they have a number of players, like Jordan Conroy in particular, who, I mean, every commentator who commentated on their games over the course of the weekend was talking about this guy as a player who will instantly become one of the kind of key stars that they'll build the sevens brand around, like Perry Baker and Carla Niles from the States, the Fijians, the kind of famous Kiwi players. So they have a marquee name that they can sell it on. They have a good, strong team who can compete. So I think from a rugby perspective, having them there will appeal to them. Even when they go to the States, when they go to Australia, there'll be an Irish crowd who'll turn up to support Ireland, which gives it a bit more colour. I think that'd be valuable.
That's a huge element. We're back to the diaspora again. But it is a really big factor. They will have a presence when they go to these tournaments.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Another aspect that Nucifora, I guess, has pushed a lot is the development side of things for 15 players coming in and out of the programme. Even looking back at the very first squad they had, you had Adam Byrne there, Tom Daly, Alex Wood and a few other guys who've gone on to big things. Have we seen enough from that side of it to justify the programme and the probably increased spend that the IRFU have put on it?
OK, well, you have two things there. First of all, is sevens a good vehicle for developing 15-a-side players? And it can be. And you've mentioned a couple of lads who have come from that. And there's no doubt, one of the things that people don't appreciate about sevens is your clean-out skills, your close contact skills in sevens have to be really, really aggressive and really, really accurate, which has an immediate transfer to 15-a-sides. But other areas fall down. And even if you did have loads of guys transferring, suddenly you're into the issue of fishing in the same pool. Now, there's already quite a bit of tension between the provinces and the IRFU over availability of players. And I know, like, Hugo Keenan would be a classic example. The last thing Leinster want to do is be sharing Hugo Keenan with Ireland 7. They just don't want to do that. And he's just one of several. So I think the IRFU really need to, now that they have shown that we have the capacity to do this thing quite well, they need to get out the checkbook and start writing decent checks for these lads, give them decent contracts, not the crappy little contracts they're getting currently. And ultimately, the success of the Sevens programme in Ireland will be that it's self-sufficient and self-financing, and that they're not going cap in hand to academies and the top end of squads looking for players. They have to run their own show. If
you look at the evidence of the teams that have been established on this for a while, yes, there are examples like James Davies, who won that silver medal with the Team GB side. Vakatawa has kind of gone between France national team and the sevens, and there are other examples, but really the longer you're at this, the more seven specialists you're producing, and the more the two seem to diverge. So I think it can be a useful tool where they can identify a player or a couple of players that could benefit from it. But I think to succeed in the sevens, you're going to have a core of seven specialists who can focus on staying on that world circuit and competing on that world circuit. I think it's a vehicle that is there at the IRFU's disposal. It's an extra string to their bow, but I can't see them relying on sevens as a kind of as a way of developing players.
The rich pickings, Murray, with lads who get knocked back by academies. Like they're not just in Leinster, but especially in Leinster where they're queuing around the block. There are loads of lads who are knocked back, and we're now looking at MLR in the States, or looking at Pro D2, looking at doing anything to try and get a pro rugby contract. There are a lot of those lads who are very athletic and could be very good at sevens, and maybe that's where they should be focusing.
And those are probably other success stories of this group. You look at a guy like Harry McNulty, who was in the Munster Academy. Conroy was kind of in and out of Connacht a few times, and now they've got a chance to represent their country, which is absolutely brilliant. The contracts is a massive one, though, for me. 18,000, we understand, is the kind of annual value of the contracts. That's just not enough for a young guy, especially living in Dublin and training as a full-time professional to live off.
If you're a student, see, that's the problem. Some of these lads are students. And if you're a student and someone offers you 15 or 13, as where figures being bandied about, if you get up to 18k, you're thinking, happy days, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
but the demands are massive, absolutely massive. So if the IRFU really want to be taken seriously in this, then they have to back it up.
Yeah, it's a young man's game, though, isn't it? I mean, I just even listening to the people who are on the circuit all the time, they were talking about I think it was the English team, and they're talking about players who are at 26, 27, and they're over the hill. So really, it is quite a young demographic for the majority of the players in the circuit. I don't think it's something that players will do for a long time. I think it's something that you'll do for the kind of in your early 20s, have the experience, earn a bit of cash. But I can't see, unless you are, say, a Jordan Conroy who could make, get endorsement deals and extra stuff out of it. I don't see it being a big earner for players, but it's a chance to travel the world, it's a chance to have a bit of fame, a bit of recognition, to play in a big stage in front of packed audiences, and some players will be sold on that.
So just in terms of what comes next for them, a busy couple of months ahead, it looks like, and obviously the Olympics is there as the next main achievement, but that will be even bigger probably almost than winning the Hong Kong qualifier.
Yeah, like they four coronations, the four top teams of the World Series qualify automatically, plus Japan are always there, are also there, and then the 6 regional qualifying tournaments in Europe is the hardest, from my understanding of it, and the fact that England are not in one of those top 4 nations means that Team GB will have to qualify through that tournament in France in July.
Yeah.
So Ireland will be up against France, GB, and a number of other countries. And that's going to be a tough one to break into. It will probably require their best performance yet. And if they don't, they need to finish in the top 3 or 4 to get into the world repechage, which is a winner takes it all spot for Japan. So look, that's going to be very, very difficult. And I don't think anyone expects them to do it. They're kind of in bonus territory now. But at the same time, they've shown on their day they can take anyone on, and they have the players that can hurt opponents. And I suppose having achieved their goal and had a bit of a party in Hong Kong, they'll knuckle down now and focus on going to that tournament in France, with nothing to lose. Whereas France and GB will probably have all the pressure on their shoulders because they're expected to be there.
It'll be interesting to see if Nucifora now, when he can clearly see the target coming into view, will he start ramping up the pressure and being prepared to go to war more with the provincial coaches to try and get a couple of other guys, more mature lads, into the setup, because obviously there are a few of them who'd be perfect at it.
It's going to be interesting. What are you going to dress up as when it comes to Dublin? That's the big question.
A bit of time to think of it.
Well, after the break, we'll discuss the new contract extension for Johann van Graan down in Munster. You're very welcome back. Yeah, huge weekend for Munster in a couple of weekends' time. Brennan, new contract for Johann van Graan, head coach in Munster, 2 more years until 2022. What's he done to earn the new contract?
He's kept them at the business end. I wonder if Munster supporters at this stage are almost satisfied at being at the business end. They shouldn't be, because the squad they have, I think, is capable of delivering a whole lot more. And that's probably where I'd have a bit of an issue with Van Graan. I think he's an extremely hard-working coach, and he's very earnest and reliable and all of those things, but I know he was a disciple of Heineke Meyer. Disciple may be too strong a word, but he came from that school of coaching, and I wouldn't be keen on watching the Heineke Meyer teams play. And I think there is an awful lot more when you look at the depth across the board that Munster have, the attacking potential that they have. I think there is a lot more that he could be getting out of them and isn't getting out of them. And it's funny, you talk to their players when you're interviewing them, and maybe it's just kind of they're repeating it by rote, but they all say, oh yeah, we've licensed to play and we can do this and we can do that, but it just doesn't happen. And they are, I think they're capable of way more than they're delivering. I
know you agree with that, Rory. I mean, we'll come back to that side, maybe their game plan, how it's evolving or potentially not. Just in terms of Van Graan himself, like, can you give us a bit of background? Where did he come from? He doesn't have a playing pedigree, obviously, and as you say, learned under Mayer.
Yeah, well, famously, when he was appointed in season and a half ago, he didn't have a Wikipedia page. He was that low profile. There was one profile written by Brendan Nell that everyone went to and kind of got the background on him. He was assistant coach at the Springboks, having previously served at the Blue Bulls. He retired at a young age. He was a flanker, I believe. He retired and his father was the CEO of the Blue Bulls in Pretoria, and he went in under Heineke Meyer as a video analyst. And Meyer obviously rated him, mentored him, brought him on, made him assistant coach. And when he went to the Springboks, he went with him, and he ended up being one of 2 forwards coaches and a skills coach as well. Known as an innovator, known as being very friendly with the players, like a friend to the players. He was a groomsman at several Springboks weddings, according to that profile that we read. Yeah. I'm not sure if any of the Munster lads have had him along just yet, but it remains to be seen. But he came in. He's obviously impressed on coaching courses. He's well regarded on the circuit. I know Joe Schmidt and David Nucifora would have given him a ringing endorsement when he was appointed, as would Rassie Erasmus, as he was departing and handing over the reins. But it was his first big job. It was his first time really handling the media, handling players, contracts. The title of his job was different to the director of rugby role that Erasmus held, but the role was the same. The responsibilities were the same. There was it's a big job. There was a reason they split it between 2 people before, and it's gone back to being the way it is. But I think from Munster's perspective, there's a need for continuity. He's almost got as many games already as Rob Penny did, as Anthony Foley did, and Rassie Erasmus did. He's almost about to surpass all of those. Not since Tony McGahan have they had anyone who's coached them for 100 games. And I think they've invested in this guy so far. They like what they see, and they're willing to give him a couple of years because they've had so much chopping and changing. And the players have said that they're sick of having a change of voice every 2 seasons. Yeah,
well, I think Van Graan, when we speak to him, he clearly cares about the stuff on the pitch most. I don't think he's too much time for the rest of it. But what have we seen in that regard, Brendan? There's been so much talk of evolution in Munster. Van Graan himself said we need to push this forward in terms of how they can attack, particularly. Has there been evidence that that side is developing?
No.
Okay.
I don't see it, and I always go back to when they lost to Racing last year in the Heineken Cup, and their set piece was so good, and they could deliver nothing, and Munster could put out 2 forward packs who are really good. They very rarely get creamed in the set scrum. They've a platform second to none, and you look at the quality of backs that they have, and they have loads of guys who can attack, who are really skillful, and yet it's only not quite it's pretty much the last third of the field. Like, this is a team who can attack from their own 22. I'm not saying it should be super rugby, but they should really start playing an awful lot more rugby within sight of their old goalposts, and they would find, I think, they'd be much harder to defend against. There's still an element when you're playing Munster. If you're prepared to meet the challenge and you're going to meet them on the gain line and you're not going to soak any tackles and you're not going to take a backward step, you'll get them.
Yeah, is that a sense maybe that, I suppose, the traditions he's learned from Mayer and also Munster's traditional style of play, that where those things, territory was really valued. Is that him trying to buy into that and maybe not expressing his own side?
Potentially. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with practical rugby to it, but it only gets you so far. And he has said from the outset that Saracens semi-final of 2 seasons ago was one that he watched and saw the limitations of Rassie Erasmus's game plan. That Munster were able to beat most teams out there, but when they got to play against the best, and Saracens were by far the best team in Europe that season, they didn't have it in their arsenal to go and beat them. And I guess next week we'll find out how far they've come in that regard. He's consistently referenced that game. And when you see them playing against the Ospreys seconds team or the Cardiff Blues seconds team when they send them over, or the Cardiff were that last week, but we have seen a number of teams come over with their seconds teams to Munster this year and get blown away. They're well able to do it. But we've seen a couple of times in big European games where they've been running into each other in the back line, where they've got their routes wrong, all that sort of thing, that you just wonder whether it looks good in training, but when they actually apply it in pressure situations, it's just not at the level. They're not delivering it. Their catch pass for that winning try in Edinburgh was excellent, but really they didn't construct anything in that game. And last Friday night against Cardiff, they scored 5 tries, but Cardiff constructed way more good rugby.
Yeah, but that was almost encouraging. The way they nailed the game against Edinburgh was just skill under pressure. And it was down to Blandal, reacting really quickly and turning the tide a little bit when the ball went over the top of the line out. And they reacted really, really well, and they finished really well. So imagine if you gave those lads a little bit more licence and a better route map in the first place. It'd be a whole lot better.
It seems the tools are in. The players want to express that side of themselves.
I'd agree with Rudd about Saracens as well. I remember we were all at that game that day, and probably we all felt the same thing. After about 10 minutes, the game was over. Munster came around the corner hard for a couple of minutes, got stopped, Sarries cleared their lines, and everybody said, OK, Sarries just looked like that's it, game done. So that's a long time. That's two full years. That's a long time. A long time to be evolving when you have that amount of quality in your squad.
Yeah, and you have flashbacks of forwards maybe not going out the back door when it's on, and that's still potentially happening. Felix Jones has come in for a bit of criticism from some Munster fans. He's in charge of the attack. We don't know what the balance of responsibility is there, but it seems himself and Jerry Flannery had a contract at the end of the season. Is there potentially going to be change there? Is that something that a head coach does to maybe go, I've made changes, my attacking coach has not worked?
Well, he kind of inherited the team, so when we see them together after games, they seem quite a tight bunch, but they are very inexperienced as a collective. I know JP Ferreira came from the Lions, the defence coach, and he's done a very good job in nailing, in putting that together. Their scrum and line-out are quite, are very good. So Jerry Flannery would be very hard done by if he was to leave. So Jones would be the one who possibly will be under pressure. But then Van Graan arrives with this kind of reputation as an innovator, and we've seen him do stuff like throw a couple of bodies into the line-out. We've seen them kind of work on their breakdown work very well and throw in a few things that you've highlighted even today, Murray. That they're thinking about the way they think about the game. It is that final piece of the jigsaw, getting that attack right, but then they say that's always the last one, the hardest one to get right. They've nailed the defence and the set piece. Is it another person that do you replace Jones or bring in an attack coach from say New Zealand with different ideas? I don't know particularly, but it would be. The players rave about Jones just the way they say. But I suppose you're always going to rave about your own coaches, but he does seem to be quite highly regarded.
And Joe Schmidt seems to be a fan as well of Felix Jones, so we'll see what happens there. Just in terms of the organisation, Brendan, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on in terms of the expectation. It does seem that there's a contentness maybe to be in those semi-finals. Even there's quotes from Philip Quinn in one of your pieces, Rory, I read from last year, where he's saying, we want to win one Pro 14 and one Champions Cup by 2023, which is quite some distance away. Is there that side of it as well, that it needs to be pushed from an organisational or RFU point of view, that you guys need to be winning trophies every year? Yeah,
but I think there is, they need to be making money and not going cap in hand to the head office looking for cash. That's number one. And, obviously there's a connection between winning trophies and getting people to the turnstiles. But I definitely think there is a realisation among Munster fans that after 2006, 2008, they thought this is it, this is our destiny for the rest of our lives. It took us a long time to soldier through to this point. Now it's going to be great stuff from now on. And clearly it hasn't been. And it's 8 years since they won a trophy, which is an eternity. But they are competitive. They're at the business end of both competitions. They do need to win something. But I don't think Munster fans, even the diehards, think, you know, we're going to win a Heineken Cup every 2 years. That ain't going to happen.
I don't think this team will ever have a better chance of winning a European Cup. I've written it a couple of times now. I remember sitting in that room in Bordeaux in that smelly post-match press conference room that was sweltering, and Peter O'Mahony sitting there looking absolutely devastated and saying, I'm sick of learning lessons. This team of O'Mahony, Stander, Murray, Earls, age profile-wise, will never have a better opportunity of winning. They come back next year after playing in a World Cup. Irish teams last time all went out of the pool stages. Then they're 32. They're all fit right now.
Yeah,
it's strike while the iron's hot. They have a golden opportunity now, regardless of who's in charge. The group of players are the ones that will go and win trophies. And this very talented group of players who've taken over the mantle from the O'Garas and O'Connells will never have a better chance.
The measure of it is Carberry, the saviour who comes down from Leinster, suddenly develops this nagging injury that won't go away. And all of a sudden Blaendale, a fellow who'd been written off, a guy who you thought his career was over, steps back up. And like, he is an absolutely top quality player. So they have the depth, they have the player, they just need to go and play.
Interesting to see what happens next. They have a massive fixture this weekend as well. We just want to briefly touch on the Pro 14 games that are coming up. Their way to Benetton. This would have been considered a chance to rotate and win not long ago, but it looks like a very different proposition now.
Well, judging by a couple of players' Instagrams, they are going to be rotating this weekend, because I think the call has come from...
They've no choice. Jesus, after what Benetton did to Leinster, the physicality is just off the charts with those fellas.
But there's a couple of lads gone on holidays this weekend, so they're vulnerable, and they kind of need to be capping. They need to catch Glasgow, because they're fighting on two fronts. Their players are amassing a lot of minutes. That week off and that home semi-final, from a financial point of view, as you mentioned earlier, Brendan, is key. And they found it last season when they went to the RDS, which they probably will have to do again this year, for a semi-final, even against a much-changed Leinster team who just won the Champions Cup the week before. That is a task that no one needs, no one wants. And Van Graan said it in the press conference after that game: we can't be away for semi-finals. They have slipped up on a couple of times in the Pro 14 this season, particularly that Glasgow game at the start of the season, a couple of others. They can't afford to this week, but they might not have a choice, because Benetton are so good right now. And I think the bookies are putting them as favourites for that game. So it is a big game for them. It's a good test of their depth.
The bookies lost. They had Benetton at +13 last week, which was daft, absolutely daft.
Madness. Didn't quite transpire that way. Connacht Cardiff Blues is a huge one.
It's a great game.
I mean, Cardiff Blues are so dangerous, particularly off set piece. Connacht weren't too impressive last weekend. Do you see them getting over the line to the playoff? Well,
it'll be interesting, because Cardiff, the quality of Cardiff's tries that they scored down in Independent Park last week was such that you think it does reinforce what a good job John Mulville has done there as coach. They had, I think, 8 coaches in 7 seasons before he arrived. You know, like the rest of the Welsh regions, they're not exactly flush with cash, don't have a great history of success. Now, they're finished last season 4th, 7th the previous 2 seasons, so they're hovering around there. I'm not sure if they have the depth. They certainly have the quality in their attack. If Munster could nick a little bit of what Cardiff are doing, it'd be good. But I'd have a bit of faith in what Andy Friend is doing in Connacht. I'd say they'll get over the line.
Yeah, it feels like it needs that strong end to what has been a really happy season under Friend.
Yeah, I think it bookmarks the whole thing. It gives that rubber stamp of quality as they go off for the summer and come back in for another World Cup year. They won the Pro 14 last time there was a World Cup on, and there'll be a real sense of momentum from going into those playoffs. It will be huge for them, and probably on the balance of their season, it's what they deserve. It'd be a shame to see them fall at the last or the second last hurdle.
Yeah, well, loads to look forward to. And just time to remind you of our live games this weekend. On Friday night on Air Sport Extra, we'll have live coverage of Munster's trip to Benetton. That game will also be broadcast live on Twitter and Facebook. Kick-off is at 7 p.m. And on Saturday afternoon, we'll bring you live and exclusive coverage of Leinster against Glasgow on Air Sport 1. Coverage gets underway at 2:15. Well, thanks to Rory and Brendan for their insight tonight. We'll see you again next week.